Hey everybody, welcome to the program. Today I'll be reviewing Radiohead's third studio album, OK Computer, from 1997, originally released on Parlophone Records. Now, many consider this to be one of the best albums to come out of the 1990s. Let's see how it holds up. In 1995, Radiohead released their second album, The Bends, to critical and financial success, which afforded them the luxury of self-producing their next record, OK Computer. The first song recorded for the new album was actually made in 1995 to be a part of the charity record, The Help album. They enlisted the assistance of Nigel Godrich, the recording engineer for The Bends, and together they recorded the song Lucky in about 5 to 7 hours. The pairing proved so successful that Nigel would go on to co-produce the rest of their albums, and many now consider him to be the sixth member of Radiohead, not unlike George Martin and the Beatles. Formal recording began in July of '96 at their Canned Applause studio in Oxfordshire, but it wasn't exactly productive. Possibly because they were exhausted from their nearly non-stop tour in support of the Bends, they felt distracted during these sessions. They could never focus on one song long enough to finish it. And it was at this time that filmmaker Baz Luhrmann asked them to write a song for his upcoming film, Romeo and Juliet. When they saw an early cut of it, they were completely inspired to write exit music for a film. And it's this song that really set the tone for the rest of the record and gave them a sort of jumping off point. By September of '96, it was decided that they needed a change of setting if they were going to be productive, and so they chose to record at St. Catherine's Court, a 16th century mansion located in the countryside of Bath, England, but more importantly, away from the distractions and noise of city life. By all accounts, the 6-week recording session here was magical. The manor itself had these stone hallways and cavernous ballrooms that gave the recording a unique and inspiring natural reverberance. Most of what you hear on the album was recorded live with very few retakes or overdubs in order to preserve the unique quality of the band all playing together in the same room. And this synergy is apparent when you listen to the record. It's an amazing piece of creative collaboration. But the record label EMI thought differently. In fact, when they first heard the album before release, they actually lowered sales expectations, cutting back on the number of units manufactured. They didn't hear the hit singles they were expecting, and they didn't quite understand what this record was about, but it didn't matter because the public did, and OK Computer became their first album to debut at #1 on the UK charts, propelling them into a headlining act. And the decade since, it's considered to be one of their best albums, if not the greatest album they ever put out. Alright, let's talk about the cover here. Now, this was designed by Tom York and his longtime artist friend Stanley Donwood. I love the look of this. It's iconic. It's like icy blue, frigid. It very much evokes a lot of what you're going to hear on the record. The title, of course, comes from Douglas Adams' Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy. Now, while they were on their 95-96 tour, the band listened to the radio drama version of the book, and there's a character that at one point says, "Okay, computer. Okay, computer. Take us into land." And for some reason that phrase just stuck in their heads. I don't know if it became like a running joke or whatnot, but it kept coming up during recording in very natural ways, to the point where it became sort of like the theme of the sessions. So much so that obviously it became the title of the record, but in other respects, it's in reference to the dawning of the new digital and internet age, which was really just brimming at this point in '97. In some ways, you could be looking at this as the Al Gore term of the information superhighway. I love everything that's going on here. Now, opening up, it is a gatefold. You have lyrics here for the different songs. You get credit stuff down there. On the back here, you have the track listing, and what's interesting is that Fitter Happier track 7 is off to the side here, and I think that's in reference to a sketch of the track order. The different sides aren't labeled 1 through 4 or A through D. They're actually listed as EENY, MEENY, MINEY, and MO. Now, both records come in full color sleeves, and right here, you can already see what I mean by this handwritten sketch of the track layout, and right here, Fitter Happier is off to the side. And on this side, you get more interesting imagery. I love these little figures that are throughout this piece. On the second sleeve, you'll find some phrases written in Esperanto, which is a language that was developed around 1887 to be used internationally, but it didn't exactly catch on, as you could probably have guessed, but you can still find places online where it's used, including Google Translate. Let's take a look at the records real quick. Not too much to say on these, just your standard black vinyl, very simple. I do like these labels. These are actually very similar to the Parlophone labels, and you have the little figures right there. Same thing on, this is side MEENY, so side 2, and here you have side 3, followed by side 4 with Mo. Okay guys, let's kick things off with AIRBAG. I love how the guitar and string parts play off each other in the opening riff, and the use of strings throughout is subtle but very effective. This is actually a very uplifting song, especially when compared to their previous work on the Bends. It's basically about how alive you feel after an accident, hence the title AIRBAG. Tom based this on a car accident that occurred in 1987 when he walked away unharmed, but was left with a profound sense of being alive. Now the drums heard are actually just a sampled loop played by Phil Selway. They were trying to emulate the sound of DJ Shadow, but as Johnny Greenwood admits, they didn't totally succeed. I don't know, what do you guys think? Believe it or not, I actually really enjoy the sparseness of the bass on this song. It has this sort of syncopated rhythm that's reminiscent of 70s dub music. In fact, the only time you really hear the bass is towards the end of the song. I don't know what else to say. This is just a well-crafted album opener. Everything is firing on so many great cylinders, and yet the band kicks it up a notch with track 2, Paranoid Android. This song is so amazing because it goes through 4 distinct movements. It starts off very ethereal with Tom's vocals rising and falling in pitch. And then around the 2-minute mark, it transitions into a groovy beat laid down by the bass, acoustic guitar, and glockenspiel. Then it hits hard with this shredding, driving guitar reminiscent of the Bends. And then it goes into this very somber walk down choir approach that's just so cool. But my favorite part is when the heavy guitars come back to end this song. It gets close to sounding like noise, but man, those are some great guitar riffs going on. Now, if it feels like a mashup of smaller songs, well, that's because it is. Reportedly, they were inspired by Queen's Bohemian Rhapsody and the Beatles' Happiness is a Warm Gun, and while I hear those influences, to me it has more in common with The End from Abbey Road. Now, just like the album's title, they were again inspired by Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy by naming the song after one of the book's characters, Marvin the Paranoid Android.
This will all end in tears.
However, Tom wrote this song about a rather unpleasant situation he found himself in at an LA bar one night. He felt surrounded by what he calls inhumans, basically people high on cocaine. He was especially shocked by one woman's violent outburst when a drink was spilled on her. Whatever their inspiration, I think the real power of this song, and really Radiohead's music as a whole is that it's open to interpretation. It can mean one thing to the artist and have a completely different meaning to the listener. For whatever it's worth, that to me is the mark of true artistry. Up next, we have Subterranean, Homesick, Alien. This is such the perfect song to close side 1 with, because after how hard track 2 ends, this is like a gentle pillow catching your fall. It lets you down easy. The cracks in the The guitar work on here is really beautiful, but what I like is the keyboards. It has this sort of groovy, out there sound. It really helps to instill a feeling of weightlessness or cruising through space. One of my favorite parts is the sort of call and response with the guitar. When working on this song, they were inspired by the music on Bitches Brew by Miles Davis. And lyrically, it's about yearning to be abducted by aliens, which I love because it's such a reflection of the 90s. I mean, aliens were huge at this time, thanks in large part to the show X-Files. And personally, I was fascinated by UFOs and abductions as well, so I totally understand Tom's perspective of wanting to be whisked away from a mundane earthly existence and be shown the wonders of the universe.
Take me on board that beautiful ship, show me the world as I love to see it.
Flipping over, we have exit music for a film.
Wake from your sleep, the drying of your tears.
Now this is a very somber piece. It opens with just Tom's vocals and an acoustic guitar. By the time the choirs come in, it's just exquisite. Incidentally, the choir you hear is actually coming from a mellotron, a keyboard-type instrument that the Beatles used a lot on their own albums. Now, I mentioned earlier that this was written for the film Romeo and Juliet, and originally Tom wanted to use lines from the play, but ultimately chose a broader summation of the final act. As much as I'd love to hear him quote some Shakespeare, I have to support his decision. I mean, iambic pentameter might have been a wee bit distracting. One of my favorite parts is right after the choir goes away. About the midpoint of the song, there's this very faint, distorted sound underneath his vocals. To me, it really sounds like a memory.
Us a song to keep us warm.
This soon fades away when the rest of the band comes in and they get this nice climactic build with Tom's vocals right on top. And it just becomes this brooding, painful, emotional ride. I mean, this really is Romeo and Juliet. It's star-crossed love. It's frustrating, depressing, and full of heartache. By the end, his voice is cracking and you can really feel his emotion.
We hope that you choke,
Just a beautiful recording that fades right into Let Down. Opening up is this great melodic guitar that lends this ethereal quality to the song. I wouldn't go as far as to call it angelic, but it really is quite lovely. It actually feels like sunlight hitting your face as the clouds are parting from a rainstorm. It's like a brand new start, and it's the perfect song to follow exit music. What's interesting is that Johnny Greenwood is playing in a different time signature than the rest of the band. I think you can really hear that in this part. The tone and timbre of the instruments are just great on this track. It feels a bit nostalgic, a bit reminiscing, and in some ways like running in reverse. And that's funny because in the lyrics, there are moments when Tom is rebelling against that very idea when he sings, "Don't get sentimental, it always ends up in drivel." Now for the band, this song is a reflection of their exhausting tour schedule from the last couple of years. They were in constant motion, never really feeling connected to the places or people that they were passing by. Towards the end, Tom is doing some vocalization on top of his lyrics that's really beautiful. And I love how the rest of the instruments kind of just drop away and we're left with this electronic sequence piece that leads us right into Karma Police. This song is so iconic for me. I instantly recognize it as soon as I hear those opening chords. And I think a lot of that has to do with the striking music video I saw, I don't know, 1,000,000 times on MTV back in the day. It was directed by Jonathan Glazer from a treatment originally pitched to Marilyn Manson. And while it looks like it was fairly easy to make, it was actually quite difficult to shoot. Nearly half of the $200,000 budget went to modifying a 1976 Chrysler New Yorker. It needed to be driven from outside of the car to make room for the camera that was in the driver's seat. If you haven't seen it, I encourage you guys to go check it out as it still holds up incredibly well. I think the chorus is really effective because the rest of the band drops out, leaving only the choir and a piano to emphasize the repeated lyrics, "This is what you get." And it's said that Sexy Sadie was a big inspiration for this song, and while I kind of hear the similarities, it doesn't exactly jump out at me. What do you guys think?
This is what you get. This is what you get.
Now my favorite part comes at the very end with this looping sound that starts off kind of quiet in the mix and then slowly starts to raise up in volume as the rest of the song sort of dies down. Now I don't really know what that is, but it turns out that it's Ed O'Brien generating some feedback on his guitar, then running it through a digital delay device, and then overloading it. I love how it builds and it starts to degrade by the end. It's like a satellite burning up upon re-entry. Oh my gosh. And you know what else? It really reminds me of Atari games. I used to play a ton of 5200 and I loved Centipede, and that's totally what this sounds like. All right, we're moving on to record 2 and starting with Fitter, Happier.
Fitter, happier, more productive, comfortable, not drinking too much, regular exercise at the gym, 3 days a week.
Believe it or not, at one point they were considering this to be the album opener, but they felt it would be a little too off-putting, and I have to agree. I think placing it in the middle of the record is great, but this is one instance where you lose something in the translation of vinyl. In my opinion, Fitter Happier works best when it comes right after Karma Police, but because of the duration limitations of vinyl, it was bumped to kick off side 3, and therefore you lose a little bit of the impact when you have to change the record over. Now, to be honest, for the longest time, this was my least favorite part of the record because I found the computer voice quite annoying. There's something very clipped and processed about it that just, oh my, it drives me nuts. But now I see it for the art piece that it is.
The ability to laugh at weakness, calm, fitter, healthier, and more productive. A pig in a cage on antibiotics.
All right, moving right along, we have track 2, Electioneering. From the overlapping guitar riffs to the unabating cowbell, this song rocks. It's the heaviest track on the album, and it really, in my opinion, should have kicked off side 3. This song wakes you up and says, hey, this album ain't over yet, keep on listening. Oh my gosh, the combination of chords and the way he's singing is just perfect. For some reason, it sounds like a theme song to a modern day spy film. But my favorite part is how the chorus is sung. The way Tom goes up into his falsetto and how the other instruments support him is just so good. But I really enjoy how they build suspense towards the 3-minute mark by cutting the tempo in half and dragging out the chords with some Dick Dale-inspired guitar work, only to have the drums come back in like a fury of bullets leading the charge for an epic guitar solo to finish out the song. This really is a sonic roller coaster, but now we're gonna have to cool it down a bit with Climbing Up the Walls. So I really enjoy the stark drum beat going on here and the eerie horror movie inspired metallic creaking. It sets a very unsettling mood. But the chorus is what makes this song for me. It's just the perfect combination of strings, aching vocals, that solemn drum beat, and this noodling thing. My best guess is that it's some sort of arpeggio type guitar lick, but regardless, the way it sits in there in this nice middle spot, creating this fuzzy round tone amid all this angsty vibe, you know, it's like putting frosting on a razor blade. The song is sharp and cutting, yet there's this subtle sweetness right on top. Otherwise though, this is a very bleak song. Lyrically, Tom is drawing from his experience working in a mental hospital, and once you know that, listening to this song again forever changes. It really puts me in the shoes of someone having a mental breakdown, especially right after the first chorus. There's a bit of some voices in the background and what sounds like a maniacal laugh. But for me, the most chilling element has got to be the strings, and I have to commend guitarist Johnny Greenwood for writing this 16-part arrangement. He was so tired of hearing the same sort of Eleanor Rigby chamber pop style of strings and rock music that he bucked the trend by tapping into what modern classical composer Penderecki was doing. Ultimately, Johnny created these amazing string parts that just get right under your skin. They're nearly falling apart at times, and I just love how disturbing the whole thing gets by the end. Rounding out side 3, we have No Surprises. Oh Oh my gosh, this is a much needed palate cleanser that opens up so eloquently with this light guitar riff that just makes you feel so good inside. It's like a fluffy egg McMuffin that you just want to nuzzle your little nose into. It's like a blanket you just took out of the dryer and it's all warm and fluffy and you just want to wrap yourself up in it. And there's this sweetness in Tom's voice that really belie the dark, almost suicidal lyrics. I mean, it's right there out in the open. It really is a melancholy nursery rhyme.
This is my final fate, my final bellyache with.
But the music video for me so encompasses a lot of the feelings when I listen to this song. I mean, Tom's in this space helmet thing that's filling up with water and he's just calm about the whole thing. And at one point he really holds his breath for about a minute. And I just see it as this metaphor for accepting your own mortality. And the sci-fi look of the video gives me these images of being alone in space, separated from your craft, floating in the black abyss, looking down at Earth, seeing all the beauty but knowing what's gonna happen. You're gonna die. But you're okay with that. Just the idea of no surprises. I don't know, it's incredible. Flipping over to the last side, we have Lucky.
I'm on a roll. I'm on a roll. This time.
Now, similar to AIRBAG, this song is about a guy surviving an accident, this time being a plane crash. But unlike AIRBAG, this one's kind of a downer. It's a slow way to start side 4. It basically takes you from cloud 9 and brings you back down to earth, but not in a gentle way. It's hard hitting, but it's also haunting. The guitar breakdown is one of my favorite moments, especially the way it hits. I think there's maybe 3 guitar parts going on at once. Really good stuff. And I really like how it ends without actually resolving. And then we have The Tourist, the last song on the album. From the first chord, you can already feel that this is gonna be a more uplifting track, but it's Radiohead, right? So it's not gonna be all happy-go-lucky. There's gonna be some sadness here, and you can hear that in Tom's vocals. I think thematically, this song resonates the most with me. I mean, how often are we just rushing around, just blazing through life with our heads buried in our screens? For me, this song is a reminder to slow down and breathe. And this sentiment is expressed in both the lyrics and in the way the song is played. I mean, it's a waltz, it's in a slow tempo, and he's literally telling you to slow down. Tom was inspired by seeing American tourists go crazy trying to see all these different landmarks in Paris, and he was just like, what are you doing? You're missing the point of traveling. It's being here. It's not trying to check off a list. It's about experiencing life in another country. And for the rest of the band, they wanted to keep the instrumentation simple and give the album some space to breathe, because so much of the rest of the record has all these things going on, all these layers. However you want to look at it, I think having it close the album was a great choice. OK Computer 20 years later still holds up as a fantastic album. I mean, who am I kidding? It's a masterpiece. It really is a classic. It's not overrated. It's one of the greatest pieces of music ever made, and to think that this was the 3rd record by the band. To see their growth from Pablo Honey through the Bends and then to this, it's a Beatles-like transformation. And yes, while the Bends proved that Radiohead wasn't a one-hit wonder, it was OK Computer that cemented them as one of the greatest bands ever to record. This is the reason we know Radiohead without even hearing a single song. Suffice it to say, they came into their own on this record. They put it all on the line and made this magical suite of music. It's transformative, it's timely, and it still sounds fresh. I really can't stress it enough. This is a must own. It's one of the best albums to come out of the 1990s, probably in the top 10, and it's one of my favorite albums. I implore you guys, if you haven't listened to it, what are you doing? Seriously, do yourself a favor. Check out this album. It really is the quintessential Radiohead record. Now, if you're in the market to pick up a copy, an original issue is a great way to go, but those are pricey, so the next best option is go with the reissues from 2007 or the 2016 pressing that I have here. That being said, if you don't mind spending a little bit more, I highly recommend picking up the 3LP 20th Anniversary Remastered Edition titled OK Not OK. The first two discs contain the original album, but the third disc is chock full of great stuff. Not only do you get all the B-sides that were released at the time of this album, but you also get 3 unreleased tracks that were recorded during the OK Computer sessions. These are just fantastic gems, and it's amazing that they actually went back and released them. I made a first impressions video on that portion of the album, so go ahead and click on that after this video to hear my thoughts. Now, if you're a diehard fan and you don't already own it, I highly suggest picking up the boxed edition. Not only do you get the 3LP set housed in a 40-page hardcover book, you also get a sketchbook, a reproduction of Tom York's Notebook, and a cassette featuring a whole bunch of demos, with the last track being a hidden ZX Spectrum program that the band made back in '96. I think it's so great that they went and did all that for their fans. Lastly, I have to mention the promotional cassette edition because it's so odd. Back in '97, Capitol Records sent out 1,000 copies of the album on cassette to various critics and music industry types. But the thing was, the tape was glued into a cheap portable cassette player. It was glued in there permanently. You couldn't take it out. It could only be played using this cassette player. This edition doesn't really go for a lot of money. It's around the $40, $50 mark, but good luck trying to find a copy in the wild. As far as the quality of the pressings, I only got to check out the 2016 edition and the 2017 remastered edition. Between the two, I couldn't really hear much of a difference. They both sound really good. In terms of the remaster, it's very subtle, if at all. There's not a lot of changes. Unless you really know the album well, I don't think you're going to hear a lot of differences between the two. If anything, this one has a higher dynamic range, but it's subtle. It's very subtle. So either way, you're going to be fine. But if you haven't bought a copy on vinyl, I highly suggest picking up the remastered edition because you get all those extra B-sides and the 3 unreleased songs. Well guys, that is all the time I have for you. I want to thank you so much for watching, but I especially want to thank these viewers for suggesting I review this album. I would not be doing this show without all of your support, and I really appreciate all your feedback. And speaking of which, I want to know what you guys have to say. Do you like this album? Is it your favorite Radiohead album? What is your favorite song? How does this version compare to the 20th Anniversary edition? Do you like one more than the other? Leave a comment down below. Until then, I am your Vinyl Geek, and I'll catch you on the flip side. Hey guys, thanks again for checking out this Radiohead review. Now, if you're thirsty for more, I made a companion cocktail called the Tom Collins. That's Tom with an H in honor of Tom York. This is a fun twist on the classic cocktail using cucumber. I think you guys are going to enjoy it. Also, be sure to check out my first impressions of OK Not OK if you haven't already.